If you've ever been to a dentist and thought the pain was unbearable, you've never heard of Dr. Silas Birch. And if you had, you wouldn't be alive to tell the tale. Because in 1902, in the quiet, snowy town of Ashmore, Illinois, something happened that the newspapers erased, the town buried, and the church never forgave. And yet, records exist, records of a dentist who never used anesthesia, who never charged money, and whose patients all left his office smiling, even though most were dead within a week. This is the story of the man they called the Soul Puller. Dr. Birch arrived in Ashmore during the fall of 1901. No one knew where he came from. No letters of recommendation, no medical license, no relatives, just a tall, bony man in a black overcoat who purchased the old Winthrop house and converted the parlor into a dental office. His equipment was old, rusted, and stained with something far too dark to be tobacco, but the town was desperate. The previous dentist had vanished 3 months earlier, vanished, not moved. Dan folks were suffering. So they ignored the smell. They ignored the whispers. They even ignored the screams, because Silas fixed their pain. At first, his patients were normal folks, farmhands, children, old men, and every one of them walked out with perfect teeth. No swelling, no soreness, no aftercare needed. But after the 3rd week, they started acting ... strange. Mrs. Elaine Durst, age 73, baked 42 pies in one night and delivered them to graves at the cemetery. When asked, she simply replied, "He told me they were hungry." Henry Rowe, a boy of 9, began sleeping beneath his bed and whispering to the floorboards. "She lives there now," he'd said. "She hums me to sleep." The sheriff dismissed it all. Stress, he claimed. Folks get nervous before winter. But the winter brought no snow, just fog. Thick, choking fog that rolled in every morning and left a taste of iron on the tongue. That's when the disappearances began. At first, just livestock, then children, then adults, their homes left untouched, fireplaces still lit, food still warm. Only one thing, missing: teeth. Their pillows covered in blood. No footprints, no struggle, no explanation. People began suspecting Silas, but no one dared accuse him openly. Every time someone tried, their mouth would bleed that night. Their teeth would ache like fire, even if they'd never seen a cavity in their life. And eventually, they'd fall silent forever. Pastor Whitman tried. He stood at the pulpit on Sunday and called Silas a serpent among men. The next day, the church bells rang on their own, non-stop, for 6 hours. The townspeople found Whitman kneeling in front of the altar, eyes wide, mouth open. Not a single tooth left in his skull. On the wall behind him was written in blood, "Sermon received." That's when Clara, a 16-year-old orphan girl, decided to do what no adult could. She volunteered for a cleaning. She walked into Dr. Birch's office just before sundown, holding a Bible in her pocket and a knife sewn into her dress. He welcomed her with that same cold smile, his long fingers gently guiding her to the chair. "You have strong teeth," he said. "Strong souls hide in strong teeth." She nodded, heart pounding. He never touched a tool, just stood behind her and hummed a tune she didn't recognize, low, droning, like a funeral dirge underwater. And then she heard them, voices, hundreds of them, screaming from behind the walls. Names of children lost, cries for help, songs sung backward. Her hands shook, her knife slipped. She turned, fast, and for the first time, saw his reflection in the mirror. He had no face, only a dark blur, like rotting fog. His eyes were holes. His mouth stretched far too wide, filled not with teeth, but with tiny hands, reaching, grabbing, twitching. She screamed. The glass shattered. The moment the mirror shattered, time twisted. Clara fell to the floor, the sound of that ungodly humming still vibrating through her bones. She crawled backward, blood running from her ears, not from injury, but from something deeper, an unseen pressure that squeezed her soul from within. The mirror hadn't just broken, it had opened something. A cold breath swept across the room. It wasn't the wind. It was presence. Dr. Silas didn't flinch. He turned with mechanical grace, his neck bending slightly too far to the left. A subtle crack, audible as if the bones inside weren't human. His eyes didn't blink. "You've seen too much for your age," he said calmly, crouching beside her. His breath smelled of wet dirt and burnt sugar. She backed away, and her hand landed on something metal. A tray, but the tools weren't dental instruments. They were objects of a different craft. A hooked wire, stained dark. A drill with no motor. A set of human teeth strung together like rosary beads. One tool was engraved with the name Elaine Durst. Another was shaped like a key, crafted entirely from molars. Clara's fingers shook as she reached for it. Behind her, Dr. Silas's shadow stretched unnaturally, even though the overhead light hadn't moved. She stood quickly and bolted through the open door. The hallway outside looked wrong. The wallpaper, peeled like old skin, and underneath, names had been scratched into the plaster. Names she vaguely recognized, local names, people who'd vanished over decades. The overhead bulbs flickered like they were breathing. She passed a framed photo. On the wall, one that hadn't been there before. It showed the town in 1899, and in the background stood a tall man in a white coat, staring directly into the camera. His face was blurry, but unmistakable. Silas Birch. She turned a corner, and the world twisted again. A low, bell-like hum vibrated. From the floorboards, her shoes stuck slightly to the ground, as if the hallway itself didn't want her to leave. She finally reached the front door, flung it open, and stopped. Ashmore had changed. The fog outside was denser, but not silent. It whispered, repeating her name again and again. Dozens of voices, some childlike, some hollow, shapes stood in the mist. Motionless figures, all facing the clinic. One of them held a lantern with no flame. Another gripped a doll missing its face. Clara sprinted into the fog. The world around her darkened, like dusk had fallen instantly. She made her way toward the old church. The door creaked as she approached, but before she could enter, a girl stepped into her path, small, barefoot. Her eyes were milk-white. Her mouth didn't move, but Clara heard her speak. "He keeps our tongues. He keeps them for the bell." Clara stumbled back, the ground suddenly soft beneath her. Grass turned to ash, and there, across the street, was a building that should not exist. The Ashmore Home for Gentle Rest and Asylum that had burned to the ground 30 years ago. Yet, here it stood, untouched, its windows black with soot from the inside. The door opened without a sound. Clara stepped inside. The warmth hit her immediately. Not comforting, warmth, oppressive, heavy, almost moist. The walls pulsed slightly, like lungs. Paint peeled to reveal old scribbles, some in blood, others in ink, symbols, spirals, teeth. A file lay open on the front desk. Patient number 109, Silas Birch. She flipped through it. Date of admission, March 3rd, 1893. Diagnosis, pathological silence. refuses tools, believes pain is a voice, claimed to extract sign through bone. Final note, patient absorbed. A crash echoed from above. She turned. A wheelchair moved by itself down the corridor. The hallway bent unnaturally, forming an arch that led into darkness. From the shadows emerged a tall figure, limbs too long, neck tilted, wearing what looked like a decayed dental coat. Strings hung from his fingers. From each string dangled a tooth. Dozens, hundreds, clicking gently in a rhythm. Clara couldn't move. The figure didn't walk. It glided. The doors on either side of the hallway burst open. Inside one room, children with their mouths sewn shut. In another, a woman brushing her hair with a bone comb while teeth crawled across the floor. Clara forced her legs to move. She turned into a stairwell and descended, hoping for an exit, but found only a room labeled Phase 2, Inversion. Inside, a chair waited, made entirely from human bones. On the table beside it, a book bound in skin. Open to a page that read, Clara Whitfield, Initiation Begins. Behind her, a voice. You have to see what he saw. She turned. It was Father Whitman, but wrong. His eyes swirled with shapes, and in his hand a long silver needle. Only through memory can you extract him. He drove the needle into her temple. No blood, just pain. Clara screamed, but the scream wasn't hers. It was Silas as a boy, trapped in a cellar, his teeth pulled one by a shadowy figure. Each time a tooth fell, the voices got louder. Not in his head, in the walls. The visions kept coming. Elaine Durst drawing spirals with teeth. Henry Rowe carving the bone chair in a trance. And Clara herself older, smiling in that same chair. The needle snapped. She gasped, back in the room. The chair was empty. Blood trickled from her eyes. Outside, the bell rang again, and the fog answered, in one voice, He is coming back. Clara blinked. The receptionist's smile didn't fade. Sunlight warmed her face, and for a brief second, she questioned everything. Had it all been a dream, a hallucination? But then she saw the chair, the same bone-colored upholstery, the same crooked painting of a faceless man above it. She rose slowly. The hallway to Dr. Birch's office looked freshly painted, but the color felt too vibrant, too wet, as if it were bleeding beneath the surface. With each step, her heartbeat slowed unnaturally. The door opened on its own. Dr. Silas Birch sat at his desk, hands folded, expression unreadable. You've come back, he said, as though no time had passed. Clara opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. Silas gestured to the chair across from him. She sat. The moment she did, the floor shifted. Not visibly, but she could feel it in her bones, like the building itself had turned on its side. You've been dreaming, Silas whispered, but not your dream. He slid a file across the desk. Her name, Clara Whitfield. Her handwriting, scrawled across pages she didn't remember writing. This is your testimony, he continued, for the second life. She opened the file. The paper was warm, breathing. The words rearranged themselves as she read. I am the memory that remembers itself. She blinked when she looked up. The office was gone. She stood in a waiting room. Different this time. The walls were made of teeth. The chairs were jawbones. A speaker crackled above her, repeating the same sentence. Please remain seated for extraction. Dozens of people waited, mouths wired shut, tears streaming down their cheeks. Clara tried to run, but the floor was sticky. Hands reached from beneath it, child-sized cold, whispering. She was pulled through, down into the basement of Ashmore, or what had become of it. The lights above her flickered like stars underwater. She landed in a hallway where time had stopped. Clocks lined the walls. Each ticked in reverse. Each one marked a moment of regret. Hers, her failures, her silence, her sins. At the end of the hall was a mirror. It showed her at age 6, crying, holding a tooth. Her reflection spoke. He never left. You just closed your eyes. Behind her footsteps, she turned. A man approached, but he wore her father's face, then her brother's, then Dr. Whitman's. Finally, he wore no face at all, just skin stretched smooth, teeth exposed through holes in the cheek. You will give us the rest, he said. Clara screamed, but her mouth was full of cotton. The floor gave way again. She fell into a surgical theater. An audience clapped. They were made of bones. Each one wore a tag. Patient, Clara was strapped. To the table, Silas stood above her, holding a needle made from carved enamel. We're going to unlearn you, he said. The needle entered her skull. She remembered things she'd never lived. Lives inside other people. A boy buried alive. A nurse drowned in a sink. A child painting teeth onto a mirror. The vision twisted. Clara stood in a church, surrounded by faceless priests. The altar held a jawbone. They chanted, every sign is a shape. Every shape has a root. Every root grows in the mouth. She looked down. Her hands were covered in blood. She held a hammer. She had pulled her own teeth. The priest placed them into a bowl and fed them to the fire. Smoke filled the chapel. She awoke in a room she didn't know, but she knew its purpose. The smell, bleach, iron, screaming in the walls. The wallpaper read, Birch never left. He just changed names. A nurse entered, but it wasn't a nurse. It was her, older, pale, smiling. You're almost ready, the older Clara said. He just needs one more. She handed over a box, inside her own tongue, wrapped in silk. Clara ran, room after room, each one a version of her past. One where she said yes, one where she left town, one where she died at birth. And in every room, Silas waited, always waiting, always smiling. In the final room, she saw a chair, the bone chair, but this time it wasn't empty. Her mother sat in it, alive, crying, whispering, I never wanted this. I never wanted him to come back. Clara dropped too. Her knees, she understood now. The extractions, the silence, the spiral. It wasn't about pain. It was about clarity. A scream without sound. She stood, walked forward, sat in the chair. Let it hold her. The lights dimmed. The air thickened. And then nothing. No pain, no fear. Just a voice. You are now the mouth. The last thing she saw was Silas removing his coat. Beneath it, rows and rows of teeth, smiling, hungry. Clara did not awaken, not in the way she knew awakening. She became aware of light, of breath, of teeth. The world returned, not in a rush, but in fragments, like broken bones, assembling themselves into a skeleton. She stood in a corridor made entirely of mouths. Each wall was filled with lips sewn shut, and yet they whispered, not in words, but memories, her memories. They told her about the time she lied to her mother, the time she stole a tooth from a graveyard, the time she entered the clinic that day, even when her gut told her to run. As she walked, The mouths opened slightly, and tongues writhed like worms reaching for air. A door waited at the end of the corridor. It was shaped like a molar, the handle a silver fang. When she touched it, the whispers stopped. Total silence. She stepped inside. The room was circular, vast, echoing. Mirrors covered every inch, all warped. Each reflected Clara in a different state, dead, bleeding, smiling, hollow-eyed. At the center of the room stood a spiral staircase made from fused human spines. She ascended. Each step creaked with wet sound. The higher she climbed, the darker it got, until finally she emerged into what looked like a nursery. The mobile above the crib spun silently, adorned with tiny silver teeth. Inside the crib lay a child, her but newborn, awake, eyes wide open, and next to the crib stood Silas, dressed as a priest. She was born with the spiral, he said, not turning to face her. Born hearing the hum of the extracted. Clara moved toward the child version of herself. As she looked down, the baby smiled. Its mouth was full of adult teeth. "What am I?" Clara asked, voice trembling. Silas turned. "The collector," he whispered. "You forgot your duty." He pointed behind her. A wall opened like flesh parting. Inside, a vast archive, drawers and drawers labeled with dates, names, missing teeth. Clara stepped inside. The drawer nearest her read, Elaine Durst final attempt. She opened it, a small jar. Inside, a tooth, still warm. As she touched it, a scream echoed through the archive. The walls rippled. Silas was gone. She ran deeper into the collection. The drawers grew stranger. Memory fragments, guilt type 3, voices with roots. Then she found one labeled Clara Whitfield, truth. She hesitated, then opened it. It was empty, only a reflection, stared back, her own. But this version of her had no eyes. The reflection opened its mouth and spoke without sound. Then the glass shattered. A darkness spilled out and consumed the hallway. Clara was back in the surgery room. The chair was waiting, but this time no one else was there. The instruments hovered in the air by themselves. She sat down. The tools moved, hovered over her face, but did not touch. A screen lit up on the wall. Footage played grainy, flickering, like old film. It showed the Ashmore Clinic, year 1902. Inside, Silas performing a procedure on himself, removing his own teeth, stitching them into pages. He fed the pages into a furnace. Smoke poured out and shaped into words. Truth is rot. Extraction is clarity. The screen went blank. The walls began to breathe. Clara stood. The door was gone. Only a tunnel remained long, dripping, humming. She entered. The tunnel twisted, tighter and tighter, until she had to crawl. Her nails tore against the floor. Then she dropped into a church, the same one from her vision. Only now it was filled with hundreds of chairs, all occupied. Every person in the crowd wore her face. Some wept, some screamed, some stared blankly. One stood, spoke. "You are the infection, the tooth inside the gum." The rest repeated in unison. "We were never meant to close our mouths." Then silence. Clara turned. The altar split open. From it rose a creature, not Silas, not fully. A hybrid of flesh, enamel, metal tools, spirals. It moved like memory. Its voice was thunder. "You fed me once," it said, "and then you forgot. Now I remember for you." It lunged. Clara didn't run. She opened her mouth. The creature vanished into her. She collapsed. The church dissolved. She woke in a white room. Clean, empty. A clipboard lay beside her. Discharged. Clara Whitfield. Condition. Stabilized. The walls smiled. The lights flickered like blinking eyes. She stood, walked to the mirror. Her reflection didn't follow. It smiled on its own and whispered, "One more patient left." Clara stared at the mirror, its surface rippling like water. Her reflection remained still, smiling, mouthing words that carried no sound but trembled the air. "One more patient left," it had said. She didn't want to turn around. Something told her if she did, the room would be different, changed, infected. But her body moved anyway. And just as she feared the clinic was gone, she now stood in a forest, but it wasn't natural. The trees were shaped like teeth, towering, jagged, roots exposed like nerve endings. The ground was soft and pulsing, like gums under pressure. Above, the sky had no sun, only a slow swirl of mist that breathed in and out like a lung. She walked, but every step echoed like footsteps inside a skull. In the distance, a low grinding sound rumbled, as if massive bones were being crushed. She followed it. With every tree she passed, the bark began whispering, names, dates, words she didn't recognize but somehow understood. As she stepped into a clearing, she saw an enormous altar built entirely of extracted teeth. Thousands of them, bleeding slightly, twitching in place. And in the center sat a chair. Not the bone chair, something older, carved from jaws, fused by pain. Silas stood beside it. Only it wasn't Silas anymore. His form had evolved, darker, coated in symbols made of molars. "Welcome to the root," he said, his voice layered with others, her mother's, her child self, even the mirror. Clara didn't run. She was beyond that. "What do you want from me?" she asked. He smiled. "Memory. Yours, ours, all of it." He stepped aside. Behind him stood a door, flesh-covered, vein pulsing, and from behind it came humming, not human, but familiar. Clara walked toward it, and as she touched the doorknob, her own teeth ached. All of them. The door opened. Inside was a waiting room, clean, normal, too normal. Except everyone sitting in the chairs looked like her. Every age, every emotion, every version. One of them stood. The oldest, wrinkled, calm, holding a clipboard. "Do you accept the archive?" she asked. Clara nodded. The old version of her stepped forward and pressed the clipboard to her chest. It sank into her like a knife made of paper. Her body convulsed. She was falling again. But this time, she landed in a theater. Massive, endless rows. All seats occupied by faces with no mouths. The stage lit up, and Clara walked onto it. Alone, a spotlight above. Behind her, a giant screen flickered to life. Footage of her life, her failures, her fear, the moments she had buried. Then came footage she didn't recognize. Herself doing things she'd never done. Hurting people. Laughing during surgery. Stealing teeth from graves. "Stop," she screamed. But the audience only stared. A voice from above thundered, "You are the story now. We are only watching." She turned. The stage dissolved beneath her. She was underwater, but not wet, floating inside a tank. Observed, studied. Needles approached. One entered her neck. A memory downloaded. Another into her spine. A truth rewritten. Screens surrounded her now. each showing a different world, different. Clara, one where she was the doctor, one where she never left Ashmore, one where she never existed. Then the glass shattered. She crawled out, bloodied, changed. Now she stood in a room with no walls, just mirrors. Each mirror showed someone else watching. People, viewers, hundreds, thousands. She saw herself on screen, talking, crying, screaming. "They're watching you," a voice said. She turned. Silas stood behind her. "You asked for clarity. This is it." He handed her a tooth, her own, newly pulled. She placed it into the floor. It sank like a seed. Instantly, the room shifted. She was back in the hallway where it all started. The door to the dental office stood open. The receptionist waved. "You can go in now." Clara walked past her, into the office, sat down. The chair embraced her. Silas appeared in his original form. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. He leaned in, whispered one final thing. There never was a Clara. The light went out, and the extraction began. There never was a Clara. The words echoed long after the lights went out. They didn't just ring in her ears, they carved themselves into the walls of her mind. Clara opened her eyes, but saw nothing. No ceiling, no chair, no Silas, just blackness. That felt ... aware. She tried to move, but there was no body to move. She existed now as thought, as memory, as something unfinished. The darkness began to hum, low bone-deep sound, like a jaw grinding in sleep. And from that sound emerged a shape. Clara saw her reflection again. But this time it was fractured into thousands of versions, all walking different timelines. One of them screamed. One of them laughed. One of them held a scalpel. The real Clara didn't know which one she was anymore. The mirrors shattered, and she fell again, this time not alone. The voices of all her versions echoed with her. A door opened below. She landed in a silent town, a version of Ashmore, empty, dead, all buildings locked. She wandered into the dental office again, the chair, waiting, but this time she sat willingly. Silas returned, but his face changed every second, cycling between every person she had ever known. He spoke. "Truth is a tooth pulled too early, it leaves a hole that never closes." Suddenly, the chair strapped her down. A machine descended. It drilled not into her mouth, but into her memories. Images burst, her mother whispering lies, her birth certificate fading, Silas injecting her with dreams. The machine extracted more than thoughts had extracted Clara. When it was over, she was gone, replaced. The screen showed a new patient now, you, watching. The receptionist turns to the camera and smiles. "You're next." Static floods the screen, but it doesn't end. Your screen glitches. It flickers, just once. Then again, you try to click out, but nothing works. In the reflection of your black screen, a light flickers behind you. You turn. Nothing's there. You laugh, nervously. But the laugh doesn't sound like yours. And then, a voice, soft, in your own ear. You saw too much. Your light bulb buzzes. Your fan slows. Your heart skips. You close the laptop. But the reflection in the black screen, it's still watching you. It's still smiling. And behind its eyes, in the deepest cracks of the screen, you see her. Clara, not dead, not gone, just waiting, because the clinic never closed. It only moved, online. Every viewer who watches remembers Clara. Every viewer forgets themselves. And soon, just like her, They become part of the archive, part of the loop. And when you try to sleep tonight, and your dream glitches, just once remember, you clicked play. You brought this into your world. There was never a Clara, until now, there never was a Clara. The words echoed long after the lights went out. They didn't just ring in her ears, they carved themselves into the walls of her mind. Clara opened her eyes, but saw nothing. No ceiling, no chair, no Silas. Just blackness that felt ... Aware, she tried to move, but there was no body to move. She existed now as thought, as memory, as something unfinished. The darkness began to hum a low, bone-deep sound, like a jaw grinding in sleep, and from that sound emerged a shape. Clara saw her reflection again, but this time it was fractured into thousands of versions, all walking different timelines. One of them screamed. One of them laughed. One of them held a scalpel. The real Clara didn't know which one she was anymore. The mirrors shattered, and she fell again, this time not alone. The voices of all her versions echoed with her. A door opened below. She landed in a silent town, a version of Ashmore, empty, dead, all buildings locked. She wandered into the dental office again, the chair, waiting, but this time she sat willingly. Silas returned, but his face changed every second, cycling between every person she had ever known. He spoke. Truth is a tooth pulled to early it leaves, a hole that never closes. Suddenly, the chair strapped her down. A machine descended. It drilled not into her mouth, but into her memories. Images burst, her mother whispering lies, her birth certificate fading, Silas injecting her with dreams. The machine extracted more than thoughts had extracted Clara. When it was over, she was gone, replaced. The screen showed a new patient now, you, watching. The receptionist turns to the camera and smiles. You're next. Static floods the screen, but it doesn't end. Your screen glitches. It flickers, just once. Then again, you try to click out, but nothing works. In the reflection of your black screen, a light flickers behind you. You turn, nothing's there. You laugh, nervously, but the laugh doesn't sound like yours. And then, a voice, soft, in your own ear. You saw too much. Your light bulb buzzes. Your fan slows. Your heart skips. You close the laptop. But the reflection in the black screen, it's still watching you. It's still smiling. And behind its eyes, in the deepest cracks of the screen, you see her. Clara, not dead, not gone, just waiting, because the clinic never closed. It only moved, online. Every viewer who watches remembers Clara. Every viewer forgets themselves. And soon, just like her, they become part of the archive, part of the loop. And when you try to sleep tonight, and your dream glitches, just once remember, you clicked play. You brought this into your world. There was never a Clara, until now